Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a really crucial update. Specifically, the U.S. State Department's recently reissued travel advisory for India. Now, whether you're an avid traveler yourself or just kind of fascinated by global affairs, understanding how governments assess international risk is absolutely essential. So, let's look at the data to find out exactly what risks the U.S. has flagged and what readiness steps they're recommending.
Okay, let's dive into this. You know, when a major government tells its citizens to exercise increased caution, it immediately begs the question, why? Well, we aren't here to fearmonger or discourage exploration, for sure. Instead, we're looking at the very specific human, geographic, and legal facts driving this designation. Because, let's face it, knowledge is power, and understanding the why behind these warnings is your first real step towards secure travel.
Here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll hit the Level 2 advisory baseline, move through violent crime and terrorism, map out those high-risk geographic zones, uncover some surprisingly strict tech rules, and then wrap it all up with essential safety measures.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the Level 2 Advisory, Understanding the Baseline Risk.
So, a Level 2 advisory is basically an official designation from the U.S. Department of State urging Americans to exercise increased caution due to heightened risks. What you should take away from this is that it's a step above your normal everyday travel precautions, but it is definitely not a do-not-travel ban for the entire country. India has actually maintained this Level 2 status continuously since 2022. The specific advisory we're examining today was most recently reissued on June 16th. This just followed a routine review by the State Department, updating things like entry and exit requirements, alongside their ongoing concerns about crime and terrorism.
Moving right along to Section 2, Violent Crime and Terrorism, or what we can call the human threats.
Now, the State Department's advisory regarding violent crime really doesn't mince words here. They explicitly state, rape is one of the fastest growing crimes in India. Violent crimes, including sexual assault, happen at tourist sites and other locations. So the crucial point is, based on this pretty sobering assessment, U.S. officials have put forward specific recommendations for female travelers. Authorities actually strongly advise women against traveling alone. They're urging female travelers to maintain a really high level of situational awareness, particularly at tourist destinations, public spaces, and especially, absolutely crucially, in rural areas, simply because U.S. authorities have a much more limited ability to deliver emergency assistance out there.
The State Department also lays out some significant concerns regarding terrorism. They identify frequent targets, things like tourist hubs, transport centers, bustling markets, and government buildings. And to really underscore this point, the notice references recent events. They specifically cite an April 22nd attack in Pahalgam, where 26 civilians were killed by Pakistan-based militants. It just serves as a grim example of the sort of sporadic but severe threats that prompt the U.S. to recommend avoiding certain crowded and high-profile areas altogether.
And that brings us to Section 3, High-Risk Geographic Zones. Let's talk about navigating these restricted regions.
The advisory doesn't just treat the entire country as one giant monolith. Instead, it flags two very distinct types of geographic threats. First, due to terrorism and civil unrest, the U.S. explicitly says do not travel to the Union territory of Jammu and Kashmir, the line of control, and the India-Pakistan border. They note that violence happens sporadically but is fairly common in those border areas. Then, you have a completely different threat profile: Maoist extremist groups, also known as Naxalites. These groups are active across a pretty large swath of central and eastern India, impacting states all the way from Bihar down to eastern Maharashtra.
However, and this is vital, there is a highly specific exception within that first geographic block. While the advisory clearly says do not travel to the Union territory of Jammu and Kashmir, eastern Ladakh and its capital, Leh, are actually explicitly cleared for travel. This is just a huge distinction for anyone planning a trek or visit to the Himalayas. It gives us accurate geographic boundaries for where the State Department believes the risk actually drops down to acceptable levels.
Moving right into Section 4, strict tech and legal rules. These are some pretty surprising logistical traps.
Seriously, this is a critical legal trap that so many international travelers just completely overlook. Think about it. If you're an adventure traveler, you might casually toss a satellite phone or maybe a standalone GPS device into your bag for safety, right? Well, bringing those specific electronic devices into India directly violates strict national laws. They are entirely illegal to possess there.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer scale of the penalty. Get this, if you're caught possessing a satellite phone or a GPS device, you could literally face a massive $200,000 fine, or, no way, even a jail sentence of up to 3 years. It's just an incredibly severe consequence for something a tourist might completely innocently throw into their backpack. It really highlights exactly why reading these advisories word for word is so absolutely essential.
And beyond the technology rules, the State Department includes several social and legal advisories for expats and travelers to ensure their safety. The guidelines firmly remind Americans to respect local customs and laws at all times. On top of that, travelers should adhere to conservative dress codes, especially if you're venturing into rural or more traditional regions. Finally, the advisory explicitly mentions that LGBTQ+ travelers should be discreet. They note that prevailing social attitudes in some areas might unfortunately pose a risk or challenge.
Finally, let's wrap up with Section 5, Essential Safety Measures, some proactive steps for travelers.
To end on an empowering note, the government does provide a highly actionable safety checklist. First off, they highly recommend enrolling in the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program, that's STEP, so the embassy can easily reach you in an emergency. It'll also need to always carry a valid visa or e-tourist visa because entry requirements are strictly enforced. On the health front, stick to cooked foods and filtered water to prevent any illness. And lastly, maintain high caution on public transport and make sure you've secured comprehensive travel insurance. Guys, these aren't just polite suggestions. They are essential tools for maintaining your personal security, health, and legal standing while you travel.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a thought-provoking question. How do global travel advisories actually impact your own perception of international destinations? It's kind of a delicate balancing act, isn't it? Weighing that incredible desire to go out and experience new cultures against the very documented realities of geopolitics and personal security. But look, by understanding the granular details of a Level 2 advisory, from regional nuances to those unexpected legal traps, you empower yourself to make informed rather than fearful decisions. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack all this today. Stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, travel safely.